Did you know that more and more people are getting concerned about how their data is being used, especially when it comes to their thoughts? So there's a new branch of technology that's called neurotechnology. And it's the branch of technology that's concerned with capturing our brain waves, our heart rhythms, and all of the physiological, especially neurological patterns that we have as humans. And even though it's new, there have been some breakthroughs already where like stroke patients can now communicate, or understanding when a truck driver gets drowsy and then alerting them to it. But for others, they imagine how soon companies might have the ability to listen in on the internal thoughts, the internal electrical signals of all their employees, and use that as a tool of oppression. I mean, imagine a government that can look at you, ask you questions about your loyalty, and know the truth.
I see. Get me the Supreme Leader.
Yes, sir.
Tell him we found our spy.
So in this video, I want to talk about the technology and the social implications, and give you a sense for why some scientists are pushing for neuro-rights, which is the right to protect our mental privacy and make sure that our thoughts are not decoded without consent.
At least I'm safe inside my mind.
At least I'm safe inside my mind.
But first, let's talk about how some scientists connected the fact that we live in a 3D world and the way that you would store that information in our brain might determine part of why we're cross-wired with our body. The left side of the brain controls the right side of the body and vice versa. Well, it's kind of weird, right? Now, scientists have been wondering about this for ages, but some mathematicians just came up with one possible explanation. So when scientists look at how the brain is organized, they find something called somatotopy, which is like a map of our body that's imprinted into the brain. But it's kind of tricky for the brain because our eyes, which are almost flat, it's like two-dimensional information coming in. It's three-dimensional information in the real world, and then it's put back flat on a two-dimensional brain. So mathematicians found out that from that, if you cross-wire the nerves, so the left side of the brain talks to the right side of the body, then it's actually the simplest way to avoid an error when you flatten that three-dimensional information. In fact, they theorized that if our brain didn't do this, we'd have a much harder time actually maneuvering in a three-dimensional world. So a new breakthrough in what they call BCI, but brain-computer interfaces, has allowed one man to send a tweet even though he's paralyzed. So a paralyzed man named Phil recently sent out 2 different tweets just using a brain implant. So this brain-computer interface is known as Centroid. And it's novel because although it is a surgery, it's not a complete brain surgery. You don't have to open up the actual brain. The Centroid uses blood vessels to access the brain, which is much more simple, much more elegant, and safer. So the device is implemented via the jugular vein into the blood vessel, which is next to the cortical tissue in between or near the motor cortex and the sensory cortex. So open brain surgery is avoided, but it's got to go in a very specific place. And doctors think that this kind of a technology in the near future could help with all sorts of conditions, like epilepsy, dementia, and depression, to name a few. Maybe one day it will even progress to the point where we want to share our emotions with others instantly and communicate wirelessly and not be able to hide them. And even though it's less invasive than brain surgery, it's still kind of brain surgery in my opinion. So what I think is even better is a DIY project that I found on YouTube. So this YouTuber who's got a channel called Fireship definitely took this DIY project to the next level. So he took this off-the-shelf sensor-filled headset to measure his brain waves. Then he taught his software how to recognize certain patterns, whether that be him touching his fingers together or taking a bite of a lemon. Those kind of actions register a unique pattern of brain waves so the software can recognize them. And then, of course, he brought in the GPT-4 API, which means his software could communicate like we would inside of ChatGPT. So by doing something like biting into a lemon, you can now trigger a prompt to go out to ChatGPT and say something and pull back a response. He made it so that when he touches his fingers together, it will come up with an excuse for why he's late to a meeting. But the potential is limitless. Any action, any prompt. So it's kind of like Neurolinked without the surgery. Works for me. So now let's talk about another new technology that can help us understand our brainwaves. So now let's talk about a cool new technology called a graphene headset that can help us understand our brainwaves. Did you know that scientists just came up with a brand new technology to help us understand our brainwaves without a surgery or putting those sticky gel things that you always see on people's heads? Those are technically conductive gels, but scientists were able to use a material called graphene to get really close to that without having to stick them on there. So they got a super thin slice of graphene, and then they made a 3D sensor that can wrap to the shape of your head. And it's so flexible, they actually put it in an elastic headband, and they were able to use that in an augmented reality headset. And together, people could control a robot just by looking at certain visual cues. So soon we might have an easy way to put something really flexible and inconspicuous on our head that will communicate with our mind without the mess of a traditional EEG, and we can control robots.
Two pilots mind-melding through memories with the body of a giant machine.
But having a full map of the brain is an important next step, so let's talk about the Blue Brain project. This cool new project is trying to get a full three-dimensional map of a mouse brain. Now, the complexity of how all those trillions of neurons in our brains actually talk to each other is so complex and so small that it just hasn't been possible before. However, the Blue Brain project has just revealed an updated version of the map with much more detail. And this new updated map found new types of neurons in our brain to help us transmit information between cells. So with this new information, they're getting closer to building a full three-dimensional digital model of a mouse brain. And it gives scientists all sorts of new tools to work with to help understand how the brain actually works. And one exciting new type of neuron they found was called the inhibitory neuron. And scientists are going to be really interested in this because these neurons help control the activity of other types of neurons. They describe this type of neuron as like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that we didn't know existed before. So now let's talk about, once you have a map, a digital representation, how you might be able to put that into a futuristic 3D printer. Scientists are working on new ways to combine electronics with living tissue, and they're now using a special 3D printing technology that's super tiny, and they're actually printing circuits inside of a worm. Yeah, like a living, slimy, little wiggly worm there. This might sound weird, but it's definitely a big step in making electronics and biology work together better. It's normally those hard circuits that just don't translate well into the soft, squishy world of biology. But this new method uses this high-resolution 3D printer and a special ink that actually grows to explain inside of the organism where they want the circuit to start and end. And then once those wires actually grow inside the organism, then you have basically a living circuit inside of a living organism that you can use for a brain-computer interface. So speaking of these biohybrid devices, the kind of hardware and software squishing together, let's talk about another breakthrough in this space. So unfortunately, as humans, we were not born with the DNA that allows us to regenerate some types of cells. Specifically, very important motor neurons that control our muscle. So in the past, scientists have tried using electronic devices and stem cells together to try to fix this. There's been challenges with both and it hasn't worked. But now a team of scientists have come up with what's called a biohybrid. Best part about cell transplantation, best part about electronic devices, together. So they use a special transplantable electronic device that's covered in stem cells on both sides. And the device itself is made of very flexible material, so when they lay the stem cells on and it gets squished between two types of cells, it can grow into both of them and the flexibility just kind of fits in seamlessly. And this biohybrid has actually been implanted successfully in mice and helped them control their arm. So maybe eventually a technology like this could be put into the human brain, the human muscle, and could benefit all of us. So I can definitely see the pros and cons of the future of this technology, which got me thinking that we should all try to be aware of sort of the yin-yang nature of the benefits and trade-offs. Imagine a future where all of this technology works seamlessly and you can immerse yourself in a complete digital world. You can experience any event that you want as if it was happening to you, and your thoughts can control whatever events you want to experience. So at that point, you might feel godlike. You might feel like an entity that's completely in control of their environment. But don't forget that the connection you'll have to make something like that possible also means that highly intelligent, artificial intelligent agents will be able to probably manipulate you in ways that you can't comprehend. Because the second our brain signals can be accurately correlated to digital information about our thoughts, advertisers, governments, corporations, whoever, they can accurately manipulate us. Hopefully they won't, and the business incentives won't be there, and we'll have a society that doesn't stand for that kind of a thing, but it'll be possible. Imagine yourself wanting to just have a relaxing day, you plug into this thing, it's all connected to your neurons, and you say, generate like a really relaxing coffee shop. As you listen, some of the conversations might subtly shift. Maybe the people next to you are talking about a new car that they want to buy. But imagine that's actually an advertisement from a car company, and they're totally tuned into your emotional state. A super smart AI could manipulate that conversation to be more persuasive without you even noticing. But it's good at this point to just be aware of the pros and cons as we all go through this adventure together. Hit that subscribe button.